Will I be able to do this? Let's find out. I'm not feeling any better since the last time you saw me. Um, I actually woke up quite sick this morning. Um, like in my stomach. I've still been, I see, I've still been eating. Um, I wanted to put as a title, like, what kind of a title do you give? And I was like, how about the definition of pain? But it was like physical suffering or physics. Is no, it's much worse than that. But I thought that love, and then it was said like deep affection or something, and I thought that's not enough meaning. So I gave the definition of always because he wrote down on a letter for me, I love you always. And always is well, look at the title, right? At all times, like right now. And you think about if somebody loves you, 'cause I know some people are afraid I will hurt myself or turn a way that's, not good. But I feel like when somebody loves you, you have to take care of yourself better than that. Because they love you. So, and I think of you guys. I wouldn't do that to you guys. And I love you. Um, my mind, like, there's this song that when I was in a band in the seventh grade, where we just like, it was a friend, and she was in the seventh grade choir with me, and her sister, and we would just write, like, well, I didn't write songs. Lydia wrote the song. She was in grade younger, sixth grade, and she wrote the song and the lyrics, and I was supposed to like practice after school, and I practiced and practiced. And I forgot the lyrics for years and years. There were lyrics I forgot for over 10 years, like, and then yesterday I started humming in the kitchen and they all came back to me. Not even search and well, I did search after I got online. I'm like, wait, I wonder if I could, and it was like it's because it seemed like, how do you describe the feeling of where it seems like you have it and you do? And how did you know that it seemed like you had the rest? But maybe yeah, it's hard to explain, I guess. My brain has been open. Like so it's just an example of there's something going on that I not total recall. Like I guess kind of I'm recalling things I haven't in so long. Um What feeling in my stomach? What are you talking about? You know what? I'm getting the feeling. Never mind. You know what? I couldn't put on makeup because I knew I would cry. I'm gonna try to read. Um, I couldn't put on pantyhose. I couldn't. Um, I threw this like one piece on, so I guess I couldn't even do multiple. The house pockets though, pieces. Just like, and you don't even need a bra because of the right there. I appreciate you being here. If I had to put my poker chip down one way or the other, I would say he's here with us too, and he's watching too. Maybe you'll get a feeling. So maybe I will too. All right, let's try. I need a coffee. I debated starting a new book if this one would be too hard. Um, remembering the before, and but the next book I want to read is a mafia book, and I don't have it yet anyway. And I think it's a good song. Then let's just see about this one. So I'm Canada High. I love you always. Hmm. Oh, okay. Mm. What's off? The night I was afraid of something impending. I was texting him, "Are you okay? Please respond." Um, yeah, okay. The box office at the Globe was still healthy in the spring of 1917 after a 3-month run, but world events of that year were boring deep under superficialities, turning people's thoughts to basic concepts of right and wrong, courage and honor. The Germans had used poison gas. Americans had died on the high seas. A large segment of America was behind its pacifist president who wanted to keep the country out of war. But it was impossible for those like Hartley and Lorette, who had seen war firsthand in Europe, to remain neutral in feeling. Hartley, as a patriotic Englishman, had been deeply affected by the indiscriminate slaughter during the Zeppelin raids, deeply touched by the courage and cheerful sacrifices of his countrymen. His moralistic fury at the atrocities of the Hun had already brimmed over the three one-act plays he had written while still in London. Now he felt the need to uncork his patriotism. "He's plumping out with a good idea," Lorette told Tyler, and at once they were both all solicitude and enthusiasm. It was in March of the fateful year of 1917 that Hartley closed himself in his study and commenced to write at fever pitch. Lorette and Tyler hovered outside the door like relatives awaiting a birth. Tyler on the rough outline Hartley had given him, and before seeing a word on paper, hurled all caution to the winds, procured a theater in Atlantic City, began to assemble a cast and make sets. After the first few days of constant writing, Lorette sent Tyler a telegram. "I think I should tell you I haven't allowed Hartley out of the apartment for 2 days except for air." Tyler wired back, "Is air absolutely necessary?" In 10 days, the first act was completed and rehearsals began. By the time the second and last act was finished, the first was out of the way. Tyler rushed around trying to find a one-act curtain raiser, but Hartley plunged on, writing an epilogue on the train to Atlantic City. 4 weeks to the day after he began his war play, Out There opened in Atlantic City, and 2 days later had its premiere in New York. It was generally conceded by the critics to be not only his best play, but also the best produced by the conflict. It was a work of great tenderness and surprising simplicity, all the more notable in that it was written in the midst of the mounting passions of war by a man who possessed a remarkable ability to hate. For the first time, Laurette's performance, brilliant as it was as Annie, the little Cockney scrub who longs to do her bit for her country, the second place to Hartley's work. One critic began his review. "For once, Laurette Taylor must bow low to her husband." No one was more delighted to do so than Laurette. She always known that he was a good dramatist. Now at last he was achieving the recognition he deserved. Alexander Woolcott was dancing in the streets, both about the play and this delightful partnership of the theater, which seems destined to find a place in its history as honorable as that won by the partnership of Gilbert and Sullivan or Barney and Maud Adams. She liked what he said of her performance, of Aunted Annie, who becomes Appy Annie when she at last wins the coveted uniform of a Red Cross nurse. You could ask nothing better than the girlishness, the jaunty humor, and the fine fervor, the uplifting fervor of her performance. You can imagine nothing more inspiring in the theater just now than the sight of her standing with hands clasped, cheeks flushed, her eyes as big as saucers, while she whispers again and again, "We're going to win, ain't we, doctor? We gotta win, believe me." It was a delicious triumph for husband and wife. There was an air of satisfaction and fulfillment both in the theater and at home. In fact, home and theater were almost interchangeable. Most of the company members were close friends. Hartley spent almost as much time backstage at the Globe as Lorette, and it was not unusual for them to have dinner together in her dressing room between matinee and night. Beside the satisfaction of a joint success, of perfect teamwork between star, company, author, and producer, all of whom had worked under pressure to bring the play to Broadway. At the psychological moment, Out There expressed certain fundamental concepts of humanity and service. And while in the theater, Hartley and Lorette felt close to those who were fighting and dying for those concepts in Europe. Tyler clucked over the pair of them like a contented mother hen. Often he found himself pinch hitting with the press for the chronically unpunctual manners team. You wait and see, he would tell some reporter waiting for an interview. She'll stroll in here 5 minutes before the curtain goes up and think she can give an interview. But I'll say one thing for her. She's the only actress I know who can arrive at 8:25 and make an 8:30 curtain. Laurette makes him eat his words by arriving 15 minutes ahead of time, beaming and dipping a little as she walks, which is characteristic of her in a happy mood when she is about to charm the press. This was to be a double interview, but she explains that she has been unable to locate Hartley all day, so they will proceed without him. Tyler takes up a stand in the dressing room door and peers down the corridor from under the visor of his cap, which seems glued to his head as the inevitable cigar is glued to his lips. He waits to shepherd Hartley along as soon as he arrives at the stage door. If there's one person more unpunctual than Lorette, it's Hartley. He explains to the interviewer. Lorette begins to talk, throwing off her hat coats, kicking off her shoes. She starts in by telling the reporter she doesn't like interviews. She thinks they are silly. She hates to be misquoted. When she was brash and young, and an interviewer asked her if she had a hobby, she said yes, collecting $10 bills. But she has learned tact since then, thanks to Hartley. Well, at least some. She is asked how it happens that she has had a song to sing in each of her plays so far. Peg, the harp, out there, that's easy. She likes to sing. She'd rather sing than anything else in the world, so she has Hartley put a song in each play. My voice isn't so good, but I work hard on my songs. It's good training, and I like it. As Hartley says of my voice, a poor thing but mine own. She explains that Annie's rendering of a whole repertoire of Cockney songs in the second act, which takes place in a hospital ward. Terry, can you tell me what Cockney means? I've heard this word before, and I think it means it's like an area in England. Um, that's an accent of location, but I could be wrong. An area, yes. Mm. Which takes place in a hospital ward, came about purely by happenstance. No, really. Oh, the people are called Cockney. Oh, uh, no, really. I didn't say to Hartley, now everybody is to wait while I sing my songs. The scene required that I make up several hospital beds. I did so hurriedly, humming snatches of tunes. A friend of mine who had worked in the French hospitals told me I couldn't do it that way, that there was a special technique to making up a hospital bed. I had her teach me each detail. To my dismay, I found the scene running 6 minutes instead of two or three. So I began singing songs I had picked up in London. We live in Trafalgar Square. Please don't steal my prayer book, Mr. Burglar. They're afraid he'll set the waterworks on fire. The songs made a hit, besides giving me time to make up the beds properly. Tyler from the door. We're going to put you on as an Irish singing comedian. Lorette registers extreme pleasure. The interview progresses with more joshing between Tyler and Lorette. Hartley, at last, bustles in with many murmured apologies. He has lost an hour somewhere in the morning and has been in mad pursuit of it all day. Lorette turns the interview over to him and retires with the colored maid to dress for the performance. Hartley exchanges a few words with Tyler about the house for the afternoon, then turns to the reporter. He becomes extremely sober, somewhat didactic. His cause of the moment is the mounting difficulties between managers, actors, and authors. He considers it of vital importance to reconcile the conflict of interest between the three elements of the theater if the theater is to survive. Tyler, still at the door, listening for the final 5 minutes to curtain call, tries to speed up his scholarly discourse. In one sentence, here it is. They must all get together. Hartley nods in grave acknowledgement of this typical Tyler summary. Only one who knows him very well will catch the twinkle of amusement behind his large, rather somber eyes. The United States declared war on Germany 2 days after the opening of Out There. Neutrality was gone overnight. Active participants at last. The American people found that the play struck innumerable chords drawn taut within them. The timing of its arrival on Broadway was, as Wolcott shrewdly stated, the envy of every counting house on the Rialto. New York's mayor, John Peroy Mitchell, asked for a picture of Aunted Annie to use as an enlistment poster. Annie's ardent, oft-repeated phrase to those who seemed hesitant to to serve their country, "If I go, will you go?" was used at many a recruiting rally. Thus did the little Cockney scrub of Camden Town slip into American history. At this period in her career, Lorette found herself in the enviable position for an actress of being able to do just about anything she wanted in the theater. She had both a playwright and a manager willing to give free rein to her ambition and follow almost any course she cared to dictate on her return to America. Hartley had gathered together the nucleus of an excellent company, members who had played with Lorette in 3 productions, notably Lynn Fontaine, Frank Kemble Cooper, and Philip Merivale. In Out There, they had been joined by that superlative actor, J.M. Carrigan, product of Dublin's Abbey Theatre. Lorette was never afraid of competition. Hartley invariably surrounded her with top supporting actors. And as one critic put it, she was noted for her heroic gifts of excellent roles to the members of her company. The next step in her career was obvious, the one that had been in her mind since she got her first toehold on Broadway, a repertory theater. In 1915, Grace George had launched herself as actress manager at her husband's beautiful Playhouse Theater on 48th Street. Like most attempts at repertory, it had not been a financial success, but Miss George had added immeasurably to the luster of her name with performances in Shaw's Major Barbara and a revival of Captain Brassmount's Conversion. At the time, Lorette was more envious of Grace than any other actress on Broadway. Repertory's appeal for Lorette was in the opportunity to play a wide variety of parts and play them exclusively and for a limited time only in New York. She was emphatic in her contention that once a struggling actress made the Great White Way, she should stay there. Failures don't hurt you, she told young actresses seeking advice. Sorry. Memories flash into you like a sword sometimes. Um, Failures don't hurt you, she told young actresses seeking advice. They help you if you're strong enough to stand up under them. In my first 4 years in New York, I played 7 parts. I was in 3 failures, one after another. But the important thing was I stayed in New York. It was the great metropolis, fickle and pleasure-loving, that Lorette found the new challenge she wanted to meet. Hardship, failure, stardom, and overwhelming success were hurdles she had taken. Not versatility and growth were her aim, and she considered a New York audience the perfect yardstick for taking her measure as an artist. To hold your place on the New York stage takes skill and foresight as well as talent. She said at this time, it is easy enough to be a successful ingenue. You have really to know nothing. You have only to be charming and young, and since New York is the most voluptuous city in the world, there are great rewards for charm and youth. But to hold your place in turn against the constantly rising tide of competing youth, you must have something more lasting. Consider the superannuated ingenue. Is there anything more tragic? New York is not a city of fixed and settled theater goers like London and Paris. There, a favorite grows old among people who see her so often and are so faithful to her that they are scarcely aware of the ravages that time is making on her. But New York is a place of shifting crowds. The majority of its theater goers are irreverent strangers. And the man from Colorado, seeing the smile and hair and eyes of the famous beauty for the first time, is unabashed and merely says, "Oh, is that she? Why, she's older than I thought." She encourages promising young actresses to do character parts while still young. When the lovely Carol McComas hid her youth and beauty in the slatternly Miss Lulu Beth, Lorette congratulated her warmly. You are so right. Play character parts when you're young and you'll never grow old in the theater. That evil day, Lorette vowed, would never come to her. I have the old-fashioned theory that acting means applying creative intelligence to a broad variety of characters. I mean to act until I am 60, and out of an instinct for self-preservation, I shall not let myself be tagged. Indeed, I am so forehanded that I have picked out for myself the play I mean to do when I am 50. I shall play then Margaret Deland's Iron Woman, which I think one of the greatest characterizations I know. She did not play the Iron Woman at 50. At 50, she was generally considered a has-been, and a younger generation of theater goers had never even heard of her or if they had thought that she was dead. But Lorette was not underestimating the strength of her instinct for survival as an artist. It would operate long after personal survival had lost all meaning. Not at 50, but at 60, she would be back on Broadway at the top. But this is ahead of the story. Repertory, Lorette decided, was to be her next step. Out there had served the psychological moment magnificently. Lorette wanted to get on to other things, and Hartley and Tyler followed obediently in her wake. Hartley had revised The Wooing of Eve, and on the theory that America's wartime audiences wished to be distracted and amused, the frothy, inconsequential little comedy followed out there into the Liberty Theater in November 1917. Hartley had four other plays either completed or outlined which were to follow. The Wooing of Eve was Laurette's third play within a year, and the first failure for the partnership. It brought a crescendo of moans over Laurette's refusal to change playwrights. In the role of Miss Albertstone, a witty, sophisticated, self-reliant American girl in England, the notices were all again hers. Author and play were excoriated by the critics. To play The Wooing of Eve for 4 straight weeks would not completely destroy Laurette Taylor's following, but I am sure would reduce it to a minimum, said Burns Mantle. A few hundred of us would still hang on believing in her as the most gifted American comedian. The play was 90% silly and uninteresting and only 10% Taylor, which is its only charm. Critic Ralph Bloch soberly pondered this quality in Laurette that lifts bad material out of its depths, the quality outside the trickery of acting, some fever that is entirely a possession of the human spirit and sweeps over the edges of the stage to catch the audience and draw its members near, some impetuosity, some recklessness that can sweep a good deal of opposition before it. Because of the bad notices and a sharp theatrical depression then running its course, it seemed advisable to abandon the idea of repertory for the time being. The next search, and a quick one for Eve was dying of inanition, was for surefire box office. I can be ambitious some other season, Laurette said philosophically. They did not have to look very far. Reposing in the bottom drawer of Hartley's desk lay Happiness, waiting to speak its little piece, which, like Peg, was quite unpretentious. Just to warm the human heart with laughter and understanding and give it hope. While Eve limped along, Hartley worked at top speed to bring the rough 3-act draft to completion. Rehearsals of the first act began with Eve was in its third week, or while Eve was in its third week. It was hoped the new piece would be brought into the Liberty without the necessity of an intermission. But once on a downhill path, Laurette gave a play short shrift. She refused categorically to allow cut-rate merchants to purchase blocks of tickets for any reason. So as soon as patronage fell off at the box office, The Wooing of Eve was unceremoniously carted away to Kane's warehouse just short of a week before Happiness was ready. Happiness was just what Laurette had feared. A box office success. Again rose the paeans of praise, coupled with the howls over the waste of her talents. Critics supposedly wield a deadly weapon on plays they do not like, but Happiness, like Peg, they fail to assassinate. The story of Jenny, a Brooklyn errand girl who delivers a dress to a rich and bored young woman and stays on to teach her the meaning of happiness. Jenny's definition, looking forward, was a heartwarming one with universal appeal. It drew thousands of letters, extraordinary letters, which contained stories of near suicides, lost courage regaining it, all through the simple message of the play. Again, Hartley had drawn on certain basic qualities in Laurette's nature, which he found so endearing and admirable. Anyone who ever saw Jenny rocking back and forth in Miss Crystal Pole's plush Park Avenue living room. Oh, thank you, Jerry. Congratulations, everyone. Mm, in her living room. Mm. Supposedly enjoying the benefactions of leisure which had been thrust upon her, and muttering, I'm sick of the sight of my Sunday suit, will never forget the picture. And again, Hartley confounds the critics of his talents by writing a love scene between Jenny and a young Irish electrician, played by J.M. Carrington, so natural, so fresh and delightful that it seemed not theatre at all, but transposition of life itself across the footlights. The mountain groans over the waste of her talents annoyed Laurette without in the least upsetting her artistic peace of mind. She simply did not agree with the critics. Hartley was a magnificent playwright. It was ridiculous to say he created roles to suit her. After Peg, he had written about a 36-year-old mother of an adolescent son and left it up to her to make her own adjustments. Out there was a child of his brain fever about the war, and the fact that her knowledge of the English Cockney and the Cockney accent was limited had not stopped him from creating Auntie Annie. As for the sketchiness of his plays, how about Barry, whose plays were called formless at first and now are called whimsical? The Taylor Manners combination is here to stay, Lorette announced with finality. Why, thanks to Hartley, I have scored a record no other actress can match. Only one failure in 5 plays. You would expect Lorette to be belligerent with anyone who disagreed with her. She enjoyed belligerency. She took on the critics single-handed. Hartley did not participate. He was modest in the assessment of his own talents. He was also invulnerable in the joy that the exercise of these talents gave him. He lived with his characters, he loved them, and he was true to them. To see them touched into life by the genius of his wife was a joy that superseded any disappointments he might feel at the lack of recognition he received as an author. There is little question that he was the more rounded and satisfied of the partners. It is equally true that the complaints of those who observed Laurette's talents confined in the Manners mold were legitimate in that they recognized intimations of a far more powerful instrument of expression. John Corbin makes a penetrating analysis of the debits and critics of Hartley's playwriting and sounds an oddly ominous warning to the strictures upon Laurette's genius. Mr. Manners has stuff in him that is worthy of the finest shaping, the most diligent process of perfection. The theme of the harp of life appealed to the finest sensibilities. The deepest intelligence. And Miss Taylor's character of the mother was, for 2 acts, a thing of subtle and consummate beauty. Auntie Annie was both as a character and as an inspiration quite equal to anything in the war plays of Barry, and the scene in the hospital was the most genuine and moving episode from the front that has been seen on our stage. Even Jenny in Happiness is, in her qualities of heart and humor, own sister to Peg, but all that is good in them exists in spite of Mr. Manners' impressionistic technique and is diminished because of it. A word in behalf of Miss Taylor, or rather in behalf of what she might be but is not. She also needs the inspiration and sustaining force of the better made play. Those who remember her Little Kanaka Girl and the Bird of Paradise know that She has resources in feminine allure and poetic passion, and is exalted in exalted tragedy, which since then have remained dormant. Is it possible that a great talent and a high spirit is being subdued to the level of these theatrical improvisations? Probably the greatest talent, the highest spirit of our times. Art and personal happiness are rarely good bedfellows. Years before meeting Hartley, and again when their partnership was breaking up, Lorette made this stark statement: artists, to give their best to their creations, should be born without a sense of self preservation. In trying to objectify her feelings for Hartley and what he meant to her, Lorette had some curious things to say. I had one tempestuous childhood, and was hardly out of that when nature built another for me. This is an obscure statement unless one understands that nature to Lorette was an all inclusive word for sex, passion, and the desire to have babies. Nature had become suspect, first under the lash of her father's whip, and later in her marriage to Charlie Taylor, which had been a disastrous emotional experience, primarily because of these undisciplined forces. With that odd mind of hers, which could be so arbitrary about what to accept and what to reject, she repudiated and feared nature as something that almost destroyed her. It is extremely doubtful that Lorette would ever have married a second time had she not met a man as gentle in aspect and disciplined in his emotions as Hartley. She states these things in her own oblique way. When I met Hartley, I had experience without discipline, confusion without understanding, nerves without balance. Hartley supplies discipline, understanding, balance. She is grateful to him for bounding her world, for stilling the floods of her emotional confusion. The powerful drives are now nicely contained, and buoy the many cargoes of her rich nature: love, happiness, pleasure, and the work of her imagination in the theater. This full and quiet tide which she rode with Hartley was perhaps more than sufficient for her personal happiness, but the potential tragedy in that happiness was that the artist in her demanded flood tide too, and would take no less. But in those days there were no shadows. Everything was fun. It was fun to walk into your playwright's study when he was struggling for an innocuous opening scene for the harp, to rumple his hair so that the dark curls fell over his brow, and say, "Let me be on stage while the audience is still banging down the seats. Oh, come on, Hartley, let me," and have him obligingly write such a scene, and the two of you enjoy the astonishment of the audience when the curtain rises to discover not a maid arranging flowers or answering a doorbell, but the star herself, Lorette Taylor. It was fun to make a peephole in the scenery and stand head touching while a performance was in progress, watching for wandering looks or idle fanning through programs, signs that a scene must be cut, the speech speeded up. Your indignation when he says, "You have no high harmonics in your voice, darling. You must take singing lessons to develop them." Then you promptly fall in love with singing and announce you would rather sing than speak. That's becoming obvious, old dear. You're beginning to sing everything you should speak. I suggest you stop the singing lessons now. There's no use being indignant. His eyes are luminous with devotion. Every element of your life and career are his concern, and he knows so well how to order these things that life flows in a smooth pattern of love and work. All right, Hartley, but please write me one song in the next play. After all, I've spent a lot of money on this singing voice of mine. Excitedly beyond anything in the moment, when Hartley emerges from his study with a finished script and reads it to his Laurie, This is the moment when creator and interpreter fuse, and there's a whole new projection of experience where the two of you begin to breathe and have your being together. This way, life can never crowd you, face you up to its drabness, the horrible boredom of its daily importunities, the boring sameness of yourself and others. How large and full of light are Laurette's eyes when she announces to her children, Hartley has written a wonderful play, really wonderful, and the curling mouth seems to be savoring the taste of rich food as she says it. Rehearsals were becoming family affairs with fellow players like Violet and Frank Cooper, Philip Merivale, and Lynn Fontaine, all of whom were close friends. There was an easy camaraderie, a sharing of little hierarchical jokes, the gentle spoofing of friends well met. The terrible tempered Mr. Banks, Laurette called Merivale for his wild moodiness, which became the most sensitive barometer of feeling when on the stage. He could slam his dressing room door and swear like a pirate over a broken shoelace or a domestic upheaval, and Laurette would forgive him, or not even have to think of forgiving him because he played with such sensitivity. Violet fascinated Laurette with her tart humor and utter regality of manner. Lynn was like her own flesh and blood, warm, eager, receptive, living for the theater. It was Lynn wrinkling her nose and giggling over some new beau they had shared at a party the night before. Lynn up to supper, obligingly eating all the fattening foods Laurette dare not touch, and not gaining an ounce, darn her. Lynn at the dressmaker's with Laurette, loudly envious of her elegant bones. In me they lose the pins, on Lynn they bend 'em. Lynn at rehearsals, one long forefinger pressed to her lower lip, toes pigeoning in. "Ere now, me girl," Laurette would say, "mind about the toes now." Or in a scene together, "Alpha Mo, dearie, you've ought my line." They had taken to prattling together like two cockney fishmongers since the days of Out There. There was nothing but affection between them, and Laurette took a terrific pride in Lynn's success. Fluid, adaptive, the girl blossomed under Hartley's tutelage. She lost her gauche ways and pigeon toes and went on to become one of the finest actresses in America. In later years, I admired her technique, Laurette said, but she never again touched me as deeply as she did under Hartley's direction. No closer bond existed for Laurette than devotion to the theater, shared with another. Indeed, it would be hard for Laurette to distinguish in her mind between favorite actors and favorite friends. Good actors she was always half in love with, bad actors she could not abide. On the rare occasion that she found herself sincerely fond of someone who was not a good actor, it pained her greatly. Poor so and so, she would sigh. Such a nice person, but no talent. Once playing a summer stock engagement, a young man who was extremely handy around the theater was given a small part, but played it very badly. Laurette insisted that he be got rid of. "But Miss Taylor," pleaded the stage manager, "he's been with us for years. He's so willing. Such a good trooper." Laurette leaned forward and spoke with great distinctness, so her meaning could not be lost. "Elephants are good troopers, Mr. Smith, but I don't want them in my company." She shunned a poor actor in her company with all the finesse of one trying to avoid leprosy. If urged by Hartley to invite such an actor to her home, Laurette would burst out, "My God, I have to suffer with him for 3 hours on the stage. Isn't that enough?" Before Hartley took her hand, Laurette's direct and swooping attacks on another player's conception of a part, piece of business, or manner of speech could be unsettling in the extreme. Bad actors could not take it at all, and even the good ones quailed. She blamed this explosive impatience on her quick theatrical brain, which her early training had given her. Until I met Hartley, she explained, I had no patience with the actor who sort of crochets his part into the proper square first, then knits these into what develops to be the entire pattern. Because I could always see the character spread out as a whole first, and then go about the tedious business of the small accents that make perfection. During the first rehearsals of Pig, Lorette sat watching one of the players doing an entrance over and over until she could stand it no longer. Oh, it's so easy, she burst out. Why do you make such a bother? For the next half hour, the unhappy man moved as though congealed in ice. After rehearsal, Hartley told her she was never to do such a thing again, whatever her opinion of the methods of the other members of the company. She could keep it to herself. He quite appreciated her unerring sense of the theater. But actors were also people and had to be handled in different ways to get the best out of them. That's my job, Lori, he told her, not yours. She promised to do better. Mm, mm, mm. A few days later, Hartley suggested to another member of the cast a piece of business, which to Lorette seemed simple, but the actor kept protesting its difficulties. The next thing you knew, Lorette had grabbed the props from his hands and was showing him. That's the way to do it, see? That night, Hartley was stern. Lorette, whenever you do anything like that again, I am going to dismiss you from rehearsal. Go shopping or go home. I'll straighten these problems out myself, without your help. Suppose I don't go, said Lorette, belligerently sticking out under her lip. Then I shall dismiss the rehearsal, said Hartley quietly. It was rather like teaching a puppy where his duty lay. Lorette recalled wistfully. After a while, at a certain tone in Hartley's voice, I either went shopping, went home, or shut up. Shouldn't they be able to act like they like each other? um, I don't know. Maybe if you're like a coworker, I don't know, you get more upset. She learned to control her tongue to a certain extent, but was always happiest with fanatics like herself for whom nothing existed but the correct projection of a part. Under her frankness, they blossomed like plants exposed to direct sunlight. There was never a good actor who was not at his best when playing with Lorette. Lorette came to have the deepest respect for Hartley's knowledge of the theater. In denouncing him as a playwright, it was often forgotten how superbly his plays were staged and directed. As a director, he could unerringly indicate what it was he wanted. A mincing fop, a blushing girl, a brazen harlot, all with a minimum of gesture and speech. As an artist roughs out a sketch, leaving the actor to fill in the light and shade of his own interpretation. His patience was infinite. It had to be with Lorette. She never did learn to concede gracefully. If she liked a piece of business, she would stick to it and argue ad nauseum before relinquishing it. It was usually too broad, too slapstick, a gesture over which they clashed. It's too much of muchness, darling, Hartley would remonstrate. The mild phrase would only infuriate her. No, the business was good. She would do it that way. 9 times out of 10, if she persisted, the audience reaction proved her wrong. Then she'd be madder than ever, but she'd drop the business no matter how dearly she loved it. Because in the theater, she was never the little girl who had to be the winner, as she was so often in life. It was not who was right, but what was right in the theater. with Lorette always. Under Hartley's tutelage, her performance became translucent, flawless, serving to perfection the right life of her imagination. With all this disciplining, both in and out of the theater, she nevertheless considered herself thoroughly spoiled. No business or managerial detail was allowed to intrude upon her. No money concerns, either where it came from or where it went, ruffled her pleasure in spending it. Squabbles with actors or stage crew, travel schedules, publicity, billing arrangements, every mechanical detail of production cleared through Hartley with his prime consideration and untroubled path for his glory. Her one function was to project, shine, live without molestation in her enormous fancy. He would do the rest. They ate, slept, dreamed theater, and their teamwork was flawless. When Hartley was alive, she said wistfully in her later years, I was kept like a very fine racehorse. Okay, next chapter is called Lorette and Her Children. Lorette's children were satellite to these engrossing activities, and this partnership, possibly by mutual agreement or perhaps because it may never have occurred to Lorette to make them part of his life. Hartley never assumed the role of father to Dwight and Margaret. He would have been acutely embarrassed by having so intimate a relationship thrust upon him. Like an animal mother, Lorette reserved the raising of her pups to herself. She loved them in much the same way, and what training she gave them had some of the same ferocity and unreasoning directedness. In that faraway night, when she had stood over them while they slept and wondered if Hartley could accept that part of her to which they belonged, she may have made one of her arbitrary decisions that he could not, and closed her mind upon the possibility once and for all. However it came about, Hartley took no part whatsoever in the children's upbringing. Lorette disciplined them, looked after their health and general welfare, made all decisions upon their amusements, clothes, and education. Her interest in these matters went on and off like an electric light. At times they found themselves without even the basic necessities of clothing and other creature comforts. Marguerite's skirts climb up her colt-like legs as she grows month by month until even Hartley is jogged out of his sybaritic preoccupations and diffidently suggests to Lorette that they should be lowered for decency's sake. Dwight's teeth, blissfully unacquainted with a toothbrush for an entire vacation, gather such a mossy plaque that one day, while beaming at his mother, he is pounced upon for his shameful neglect and retorts with spirited self righteousness, But I haven't got a toothbrush. A pain or childish indisposition coming at the wrong time is simply a nuisance. And all mention is to be suppressed until Lorette can get around to doing something about it. She has little or no understanding of pain, never having had any except for the hernia on returning from England. She hates illness, again, as an animal hates and lashes out at weakness or physical disability. She tends to take it as a personal affront if a child vomits or breaks out in a rash. An underlying antagonism is quite manifest until the child grows well again. Family life, even in the rudimentary form in which it existed, was never settled. It seemed to consist, except for the calm figure of Hartley, of a series of explosions of either animosity or affection emanating from a base that could not be logically explored and therefore anticipated. Flagrant breaches of discipline went entirely unnoticed, while minor or even imagined infractions brought the abrupt impact of Lorette's fury like a bolt from the blue. With her penchant for emotional extremes, which she could not indulge with Hartley, she tended to believe the outlandish and ignore the obvious in any misunderstanding with her offspring. A scene, as stated before, was considered by Lorette as wholly salutary, and indicative of having discharged in full her parental duties. She was childishly defensive about these duties when she burst out to Zoe Atkins, the playwright. I'm a good mother. All during the war, I saw to it that Marguerite washed her hair in eggs. It was quite true. At intervals, she would dispatch a telegram to the Mother Superior of the convent where Marguerite boarded. Please wash Marguerite's hair in eggs. This type of dramatic attention was in certain respects quite as harrowing as her neglect. As her popularity with the public grew and she continued to depict the very essence of youth in the theater, these unusually tall and rangy children became an increasing embarrassment. Lauret tackled this problem in characteristically heroic style. On the eve of his 10th birthday, Dwight's heart was almost broken by the parental announcement that, contrary to his high expectations, he would not advance to the treasured age of two numerals, but would remain 9. I don't think it works like that. His despairing protests were of no avail. Oh, God. From then on, his secret was buried in the family archives, lost to family memory. It was never again exhumed, even to boost the faltering confidence of Marguerite, who, without the cut in the age differential, was suffering by the comparisons to her talented brother. It is indicative of the strong hold Laurette's fantasy life had upon the members of her family, that despite striking evidence to the contrary, such as photographs of Dwight towering above his baby sister, their classes at school, and later a natural gravitation to their proper age groups, this fraud became fact, and only the digging up of records upon Laurette's death re-established the truth. It was in England that Laurette began the capricious program of concealing her children entirely or exhibiting them with pride, depending upon the place, the people, and her mood of the moment. In this, she was to some extent a victim of the mores of the day, which required an actress to remain eternally young and eternally infertile to maintain her popularity. But Laurette improved upon the mores by indulging without thought both an intense pride in her children and an equally cavalier disregard for them when they interfered with her career. Because of this violently shifting behavior, Marguerite and Dwight learned at an early age to improvise on their conduct at a moment's notice as the need arose. Sensing that they were to be exhibited as prize pieces, they immediately galvanized themselves into what they considered to be their most winning behavior, or realizing that they were persona non grata, they attempted to dissolve like the Cheshire cats, taking even their smiles along. The crowded streets and shops of London were fraught with hazard, when, in the company of their mother, it is so easy for a child to forget everything about its parents, no matter how famous and brilliant, except their parenthood. It took many a sharp command or low growl in the throat to warn them that it was Laurette Taylor, the actress, not their mother, who for the moment was holding the center of the stage. The cry of mother is still almost an umbilical attachment in the very young, and the scowling, angry figure that bears down upon one because of that cry has no relation whatsoever to the being who has been evoked. The sun blacks out. Fear takes the place of pleasure. There is a cataclysmic sense of loss, both of the wonder world discovered a moment before and of the beloved parent to whom one has called to share the wonder. It seems an eternity later that a salesgirl's titter or a cockney voice saying, "Oh, Miss Tyler, you were just lovely. I must have been half a dozen times to the show," gives the cue that has been woefully missed, that this is Miss Tyler, not mother, with whom the child walks. Summers were not so bad, particularly when the family returned to America to spend most of them by the seashore. There was a wonderfully rich companionship of swimming, tennis, loving the sun, and the sights and smells of the seashore together. Forced by increasing weight to devote her summers to reducing, Laurette withdrew from the public eye and saw only intimate friends, most of whom were in on the secret of her motherhood. Thus, the rude shock of being disowned came less frequently, but the prospect of winter holidays developed something close to an anxiety neurosis both in Marguerite and Dwight. Christmas and Easter were auspicious times for the brilliant opening nights which Lorette and Hartley commanded. Freshly and triumphantly before the public, Mr. and Miss Manners were in great demand socially. Vacation days were a whirl of events, but for the children abruptly transferred from the austerity of Catholic schools to the glittering, fast moving life of a reigning Broadway star. They were days etched with sharp uncertainties and grueling misapprehensions. Dizzily they swung from spotlight to oblivion. Even the glamour of witnessing their mother's performance in her latest success was tinged with a certain melancholic sense of loss, an instinctive search under the grease paint, the aura of the make believe personality for what was familiar and reassuring. Children seemed to long for the commonplace and apparent, a perversity rarely appreciated, and certainly not at all by Lorette, who loathed the commonplace. The association of stage and parent adds to the confusion of young souls already struggling to distinguish the real from the false. Marguerite never forgot the terror that seized her when, in The Bird of Paradise, the curtain fell on the vision of her mother, poised on a rocky ledge above the volcano's seething crater, and rose a second later to reveal only Luana's native lover peering into the fiery depth. Make believe and reality merged with shattering finality, and the piercing scream "Mother" rang through the theater. Long after she was jerked from her seat in the balcony, rushed to Lorette's dressing room to be shown her mother alive and unharmed. Marguerite's wild sobbing continued unabated. As for Dwight, it took years of adolescent research to discover that beautiful but stupid women were not wearing elaborate masks and disguises over sleeping intellects and unawakened souls, but were simply stupid. What? It's just that ship travel turned out to be the worst of it. The children, while still small, made several crossings between London and New York with their famous mother in the limited confines of a ship. The hazards of concealment were greatly intensified. There were the reporters and photographers to be rigorously avoided. And what with the normal confusion of arrival and departure, farewells in the cabin, statements to the press, the children were in a fever of uncertainty about whom to greet and from whom to hide. It was a nightmare of dodging behind trunks, being shoved into bathrooms for indefinite stays, and abruptly released into the arms of family friends, cognizant of their existence. Marguerite, for such occasions, was dressed in the most babyish outfit Lorette could find, usually pink ruffles. Dwight took advantage of the situation to stroll about in a manful attempt to appear to be traveling alone. The days at sea were not much better. Playing on deck, the children would spy Lorette out for a brisk walk with some unknown companion. A lift of the eyebrow or shoulders exaggeratedly turned meant they were to pass each other as total strangers. If the children were so unfortunate as to lunge forward in spontaneous greeting, there would be a glared warning to retreat, causing in their small bosoms a pell-mell reversal of responses which reduced them to something close to gibbering idiocy. Occasionally, shipboard departure was planned as a game so that they could at least feel like participants in the event. The press would be ushered into one room of Lorette's suite while Marguerite and Dwight hid in an adjoining bedroom. The conspiratorial silence the signaling back and forth, the suppressed giggle as they listened to the gay and animated talk on the other side of the door, inflated their egos with a dim but definite sense of accomplishment. And when the conference was over and Lorette flung open the door, they would run laughing to her arms, fairly bursting with pride, but it was never really quite clear to them why they were so unacceptable at certain times and so desirable at others. Their joyous return to the bosom of their parent was tinged with the hysteria of the outcast, whose numerous exiles begin to overshadow his reclamations. Lorette was entirely obtuse in such matters and never understood why the children could not take this on again, off again relationship as a game. Her own childhood had consisted of being first this one and that one, French or Spanish, soulful, adventurous, prankster, siren. All these masks were more entertaining than the everyday personality. Then why should her children object to assume different roles for different occasions? One moment they were glorious extensions of herself, the most beautiful, the most talented children in the world. The next, this beauty and talent with which she invested them was competing with her, embarrassing her career. Immediately they became strangers, interlopers, and she would have none of them. This was the flux in her so difficult to understand and to live with unless it was comprehended at its source as that mysterious genius force which, like the tide setting in for the shore, carries before it or overruns willy-nilly everything in its path. It was difficult not to fall into chronically furtive behavior. As the children grew older and acquired sophistication, they attempted to counteract this tendency by a studied attitude. Dwight, who was an exceptionally gifted and beautiful boy, walked into every situation determined to overcome its difficulties. With an irresistible show of charm, Marguerite hid terror and the urge to skulk under a haughty, at times almost glacial composure. Her charm being a lesser potent, she did not rely on it in any key situation of uncertainty. It was an attitude which Lorette, with no small degree of asperity, dubbed a princess complex. In any intense situation between them, and there were many, this princess complex was usually the final defense of the daughter and the last straw for the mother. There is a question as to who was more puzzled by their relationship, parent or children, as Lorette lost touch with the primitive impulses which had made her fiercely guard and protect them when they were small. There was a mutual bafflement. It was a relationship which did not lack love, but did lack almost totally any form of adequate expression. It is a fact that more and more these primitive impulses which had guided Lorette as a mother, went into the theater, and it is a fact that in the theater the children were focused to find what was lost to them in life, the tenderness, the understanding that lit Lorette's performances like a lantern, for it was in the portrayal of mother love, of a mother's fierce devotion for her child in such plays as Humoresque, Alice Sit by the Fire, Outward Bound, and the Glass Menagerie, that Lorette reached the height of her art in her mature years. Here again is the magic and mystery and the heartbreak of the creative artist. At Christmas time, Lorette expiated all her sins of omission in regard to her family. Christmas was a day dedicated to family, and unless there was a first night, it was pursued with exhausting concentration. On Lorette's order, no one stirred from the house all day. Even when the children were grown, any suggestion that they accept an outside invitation brought grievous cries from family, betrayal mingled with rage, relatives who might have been dead and buried for all anyone knew at any other time of the year. arrived for Christmas dinner and were showered with gifts. Sister Bessie usually turned up with her brood of five. Laurette's brother Edward and his fiancée, various Cooney and Dorsey cousins, nieces and nephews, Loretta Cooney, who had got herself in many a difficulty as a child, opening every package under the tree, whether hers or not, was now undisputedly in charge of the show. She had bought the presents, wrapped the presents, put them under the tree, which she had decorated herself. So why shouldn't she open them and enjoy them to her heart's content? Christmas was finally and magnificently hers. Mechanical jumping tigers, a crawling cat with eyes that light up at each turn of the head, jewel-like feathered birds that sing in golden cages, dolls of staggering originality, wearing fabulous clothes, clowns that somersault on high wires, anything and everything that excites, astounds, amuses, until you clap your hands, rock with laughter, and pull your knees up just as you did as a child from the exquisite astonishment and delight that such things bring. What is it, Marguerite? You wanted a rocking horse? Oh, good Lord, anybody can have a rocking horse. That's just damn dull. Don't you like that cat? That wonderful cat? Why, he might be alive. I never saw anything like it. It's positively creepy. What is it, Bessie? You could have used some money. Oh, my God, on Christmas, do you have to be so practical? The kids are enjoying their presents. If you're not, go back and sit down. And so it goes, Lorette having the time of her life with everybody's presents. Woe betide the one who gives her an even faintly practical or conventional gift. What's this? An antimacassar? Oh, a shawl. Well, dearie, I'm not that old. I'll give it to the cook. She's an escaped slave and once shook hands with Lincoln. Darling, gloves? How nice, but I don't wear gloves except at funerals. Perfume? But why should I use perfume? I have a nice smell of my own. Come on, everyone, let's have turkey. Only Hartley escapes. Whatever unbearable conventionality there is attached to a gift of jewelry, he covers over by seeing that each piece is specifically or specially designed for her by Marcus and Co. under his supervision. Gloriously romantic pieces. Matching sets of necklace, bracelet, pin, ring, given piece by piece at Christmas, Easter, opening nights, anniversaries, 1 year in sapphires, the next in rubies, the next in emeralds, never in the subduedly elegant velvet case, but in an old cigar box, buried in excelsior, boxed and boxed again, and finally crated until it is the size of a suitcase, or in a flower pot with a single lily growing in it. And only because he has never sent her a potted flower and she knows his tricks. Lorette begins to dig until she hits a small tissue wrapped object, a pigeon blood ruby perfect flawless set in a platinum ring. If she is not astounded by its originality, which she generally is, she is delighted by the manner in which it is presented. Once he gave her a diamond necklace, not specifically designed for her, but replete with fabulous stones. Lorette labeled it characterless. It might have been bought for anyone, she told him. Besides, she did not like diamonds, she never wore it, and eventually was returned for something more alluring. Hartley escapes in other ways, too. He is the only one allowed from the house on Christmas Day. Lorette knows that it is useless to try and keep for family get-togethers. As surely as seagulls flying inland presage a storm, the sight of Hartley, hat on head, cane crooked over arm, and drawing on his gloves as he passes from study to front door, is an infallible harbinger of a family conclave. To members already arrived, he explains with the most charming and diffident smile that he is just off to the club. There is gracious handshaking all round, of the hail and farewell variety, and he is gone, leaving all suffused with goodwill and feeling a bit as though they have taken part in some historical effort. Hartley's orbit could be charted as exactly as that of a planetary body. No manager ever changed his habits less upon entering the state of matrimony. Wherever the family resided, his quarters, bedroom, study, dressing room, and bath were separate from the rest of the house, and these quarters were sacrosanct. The children never came there except by special invitation, and Lorette claimed that she herself did not invade them unless a thunderstorm was brewing or I couldn't balance my checkbook. He was referred to by the family as the bachelor in our home and treated as such. His stacks of shirts, socks, gloves, dozens of handmade shoes, and meticulously tailored suits, all in their exactly designated places, were the wonder of an otherwise haphazard household. Row on row of mysterious nostrums, unheard of hair tonics, and mouth washes lined the shelves of his bathroom, and cigars, pipes, and smoking tobacco were props in any room where he functioned. The only unruly element in his life was his smoking. He was rarely without a cigarette or cigar between his lips, and the disposition of the ash was a perilously small concern to one who had for so long inhabited club rooms and hotels. He left a trail of it about the house, and after an evening session of bridge or storytelling, there was apt to be a fine white sift around him as around a spent volcano. His relationship with the children remained on exactly the same basis that it had been when his was the status of honored guest evening after evening in the bungalow in California. They coined the nickname Jortley by using his first initial, eliding the H of Hartley. They remained on their best behavior with him, and he on the most formal terms with them. If they missed anything by his not assuming the role of father, they were entirely unconscious of the fact. This oddly Victorian relationship held for them a unique charm. Both children came to adore him in a shy, uncommunicative way, and he returned their feeling in the same manner. They grew into adolescence. His influence on them was considerable for all that he never presumed to offer them a word of advice or correct them, except by inference. The very rigidity of his code of behavior stood out for them in a world of fluctuating values. Criticism of such rigidity never occurred to them. It was. Over the years, imperceptibly, they anchored in its lee, came to depend. Oh, thank you for being a member for 1 month. To depend on it. As Lorette did, let it bound a world that otherwise tended to explode into emotional instability. What does this say? Token Neki is the name of the next chapter. During the summer of 1968 at Tokeneke, Connecticut, Lorette discovered Hartley's one failing, if such it could be called. He was an intermittent drinker. It was a form of drinking which, other than in its unbroken continuity once begun, seemed to be not in the least compulsive or given any of the uglier aspects of alcoholism. If anything, drinking improved him. It extended his characteristic urbanity, brought the Irish leprechaun out from under the British lion. At times and for periods, he would even drink too much, but the only sign would be an increase of puckish humor. the capsule capering of a free spirit, which, when sober, he lacked. Lorette at first looked on his drinking as one more fact of Hartley's superior sophistication, his knowledgeableness in a world that was quite new to her. He knew how to drink, obviously, and it was quite comme il faut in the circles in which he moved. She became his pupil in this as well as the other amenities of the good life. It was after they returned from England that she noticed how methodical his drinking had become. There were no parties at the time because of Elizabeth's death, and Lorette was recovering from her illness. But during the course of an afternoon and evening, Hartley would down a considerable number of highballs, and the next day begin all over again. There were no bromo seltzers, no depressions, just a steady, genial glow, a willingness to pass endless time in storytelling, late hours and badinage. Come on, old dear, sit up with me while I have one more for the road, sort of thing. That spring he began to grow a beard, an adornment of such dashing contour that it made him look like a character out of the novels of de Musset. By the time they moved to Tokeneke for the summer, the beard was flourishing, and so was Hartley. Oftentimes that summer, Lorette would be found studying her spouse with an amused grin on her face as though she were appraising a partial stranger. There was a Hartley with more elasticity than she had ever known. The curls over the widow's peak were just a trifle more unruly, and occasionally a flush on the cheeks made the dark brown eyes more lustrous than ever. But that was all. Control of his drinking seemed to be as constant as the drinking itself. This was to Lorette indeed a marvelous thing, and when she realized there was to be no spilling over, she began to enjoy this new and wondrous Hartley. It was a long, oh, thank you, Jerry. Congratulations, everyone. It was a long, lazy summer with many congenial friends as neighbors. For almost the last time Lorette could enjoy her vacation days rather than spend them grimly battling her lifelong enemy, Fats. The John McCormicks were next door neighbors on the rocky promontory where both families had homes overlooking Long Island Sound. Little footpaths were quickly worn in and out the rocks between the two houses. Tennis, picnics, swimming from the McCormick yachts, the Macushla, or sailing out mm, mm, on the Sound in the bevy of canoes were everyday affairs. In August, Grace George and her husband William Brady took the third house on the promontory, and the little footpaths extended in that direction too. Drinking made Hartley extremely sociable. All his rather tight prejudices dissolved in a glow of good fellowship which nothing could disturb. McCormick was a fanatic about his tennis and kept himself in a constant state of aggravation over his game by importing such opponents as Maury McLaughlin, then champion of the United States. Like a child, he had a tempestuous dislike of losing and made little attempts to dissemble the fact. When sober, this nettled the urbane Hartley. A methodical, uninspired player, he could win or lose with equanimity, but one day, with dark curls blissfully awry and cheeks flushed, he teamed up with John for a game of doubles. They were roundly beaten, Disgustedly, John hurled his racket over the back stop into the Sound. Promptly, Hartley sailed after it. John turned, lowered his big, handsome head, and stared at Hartley unbelievingly. Now, what in the name of God made you do that, Hartley Manners? He asked. Hartley beamed. Serves him right, he chirped happily. Bally old things lost the game for us. John and Peg McCormick never called Lorette anything else, constantly argued, but with them it was a form of mutual admiration. They tried out each other's sharp tongues for the sheer devil of it. John had been singing at Covent Garden when Lorette brought Peg to England. He and his wife Lily went down to Eastbourne for the out of town opening. Afterwards, he stood in the dressing room door and his tribute came out this way. Hello, Miss Taylor. I think you are magnificent, but whatever salary they're paying you, it's too much. There are hundreds of girls in Ireland kneeling in her churches and walking her streets, just like the one you play, and faith, they do it for the price of a day's washing. John even put up with Laurette's tennis, although more than once he was driven to exclaim, "For the love of God, Peg, is it eggs ye are frying on that racket, or are ye serving the ball?" On an occasional Sunday, Lorette went to church with Grace George and Bill Brady. But she was on somewhat strained terms with the Catholic Church because it had not recognized her marriage to Hartley. When chided by Grace for her backsliding, Lorette answered with considerable spirit, "Well, I'll," and the word would be slurred with a high childish indignation. "The church doesn't recognize my marriage to Hartley, so I don't recognize the church." Religion, as everything, was a highly personal matter to her. One day toward the end of summer, Lorette was in the middle of a story at luncheon when Hartley excused himself for a moment and went to his room. In a short time he was back, slipping quickly into his chair, though eager not to miss a word of what his wife was saying. Glancing up, Lorette broke off in astonishment. "My God, Hartley, you can't do that to me. I didn't know where you were." For there he sits, beard gone, the beautiful skin that had been buried for months under a black mat, now smooth as a baby's, the brown eyes looking more enormous than ever. He is another man entirely. He is, Lorette soon discovers by the stroke of a razor, a non-drinking man for the next 6 months, maybe a year, maybe two. Sometime, somewhere in the future, he will arrive home in the evening from a dinner or from the club, and she will know that he is off the wagon. There will be the unmistakable aura of that other man again, the monk who has munched on the lotus, leprechaun with a load of liquor, but until that time, not a drop will pass his lips. This is the man she learned to live with, and years later learned to envy for a control of and seeming imperviousness to alcohol, which she was to fail for so long and heartbreakingly to master. Okay, so um that ends that chapter. I'm gonna end the reading there for tonight. We're like halfway through this book. We're such a good way. Oh, well, almost halfway, maybe. Well, good. I'll show you because I do. Here. Usually in a biography, there are resources, but I don't know if they show up. See what I mean? Sorry, I didn't do my bangs today. I actually haven't showered today or yesterday, although I did jump in the pool today. That's it, just jumping like one lap. And I did go in the pool last night with that friend of his. She was here, then she left. But and the other lady might be coming tomorrow, so that's what I was gonna say. I'll pick it up there tomorrow. I don't know. It was only when I talked to her. She called me. It's like, "How are you doing?" And talk for a while, and then she had to go. There was pest control day or something, and her dogs were barking. Um, so I don't know if I'll be live tomorrow, or maybe if she calls me that she's coming, I'll just do it earlier. I don't really know. It's a lot of it is trying to make sure I'm okay. But like if they were to be here like longer term, then I would just do the show because like you're gonna be here. But if they're here for a time, and it's a drive, I'm like, I should just spend the time if they but I don't know, people are different, but, and so that's what I'm thinking, but I will keep you posted. Um, Thank you for bearing with me tonight. I'm kind of feel like I'm flow, like I'm letting it somewhat, not even letting, because things will, I guess letting in a way in the sense of when you're not allowing yourself to be as anxious. I'm trying not to allow myself to be as anxious in that regard, letting it unfold. Um, because I don't know what's going to happen to me, to how life will make any kind of sense. Um, Losing my dog, losing my long time manager. Um, And now there's women in my life, which is like wonderful. I'm not used to this at all. Um, and then me and Fila. So yeah, I don't have a final thought or a finality. I have a work in progress, a life unfolding, and since may come in time, maybe a long time, maybe in the end. So, but tonight I think was a good step, a good progress, that I did it with the love always of you guys. And I'm so thankful that I have you. So, so thankful. So, all right. You have a good night. We're constant. We're getting it right. I love you so much. And I will try to see you tomorrow, okay? But I will keep you posted. I love you.